Hello everyone, Jazzy is back with another Kingdom Hearts theory video. About 10 days ago I released part 1 of my Kingdom Hearts Dark Road theory series, in which I discussed the finale of Kingdom Hearts Dark Road and brought forth new theories and also expanded on previous ones I had. In this video I would love to definitely represent those theories in a more clear and organized fashion, as in my last video I was a little excited to try to get all my thoughts out there, and they were kind of not all cohesively flowing together as I normally like. So in this video I will lay out my theories and kind of divide it into 4 or 5 different parts. So the main thing that we learned from Kingdom Hearts Dark Road is this importance now of ancestry in Sora's world, stemming from the ancient Keyblade wielders up until now, and then also the concept of hearts being reborn. So we saw this with the player, especially in this update, in which the player from Kingdom Hearts Union Cross was reborn into this old man that was in Skylight Asylum and became Xehanort's guardian. I would love to discuss 4 main topics. We have ancestral inheritance, in which we're looking at bloodlines of the Kingdom Hearts characters. We also have reborn hearts, or another lifetime, as it was eloquently put by the player in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. We have replaced hearts, which can also be extended into these replicas that we've been introduced to through Riku Replica, and also Nobodies in a sense as well, and of course Shion's existence. And then finally going into the topic of giving darkness form, which is associated with sharing hearts and being part of a greater whole. So sit back and relax, and let's deep dive into Kingdom Hearts theory mode. Part 1, we'll be discussing ancestry. In Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, we learn that Xehanort is a great-great-grandson of Ephemer. At the end of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, we learn that Ephemer is a great Keyblade wielder, and he began Scarlet Adkylum that arose from the ashes of Daybreak Town. We saw that in the time that Brain arrived to Scarlet Adkylum, Ephemer is memorialized in stone. We don't know if he's still alive or not. That's yet to be seen. But of course, we do learn that Brain is coming to this place at a later time point. So my last video, I kind of had it set up in terms of showing that Ephemer was at that later generation. There's probably a generation in between him and when Brain arrived, and then even another generation in between Brain and Xehanort and Ericus being born, of course, with Xehanort's mother being at that generation in between. We did learn in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road that Ericus' grandfather had battled the darkness, and we have all assumed at this point that Ericus' grandfather is Brain, so he would fit nicely again in that spot of being being in the generation before Xehanort's mother, of course, and then leading up to Xehanort and Ericus. We don't know what generation is going on in between Ephemer and when Brain arrived, so we don't know who Ephemer's child or children are, but we do know that, of course, their descendants will eventually lead to Xehanort. Another thing we don't know is how many children are part of this lineage, and if any of these children had crossed paths with Brain, which would eventually lead to Ericus also being a descendant of Ephemer. He may not be, but if so, that would make a strong connection between Ericus and Xehanort in terms of them being very strong Keyblade wielders and becoming masters. Now with the Xehanort, it's also very important because we know that he was taken to Destiny Islands, and he was kind of giving this title as a child of Destiny, or a child of Destiny will arise from Destiny Islands, which of course we've all associated with Sora. It would be interesting, since Sora and Riku are both from Destiny Islands, that they are also descendants of Ephemer because of Xehanort's presence in the Destiny Islands. Again, we don't know if Xehanort had any children or not, or if any of his other relatives had ventured to Destiny Islands as he did, or maybe even Ericus's, but in any case, Sora and Riku may also be descendants of Ephemer and our Brain as well, or both. So for now, this is the setup I have in terms of flowing from Ephemer through Xehanort's mother to Xehanort and then possibly Riku. And then of course flowing from Brain to Ericus and then possibly Sora and our Riku as well. And if you see my previous videos, you would know that Brain seems to be the same person as Lushu, that Lushu's existing has two different existences at the same time. So you have Lushu we know that ends up in the break form, and then we also have Lushu that saved himself from perishing in Daybreak Town by sending him to the future to Scarlet Kylum, and that's the Lushu we know as Brain. So these characters will fall under this Destiny Island Ancestry. Now kind of moving on into other places that we know within the Kingdom Hearts universe, we also are wondering what ancestral connections Kairi might have, what ancestral connections Ansem the Wise might have, because they are both originating from Radiant Garden. And then of course in my last video I proposed maybe even the Master of Masters has some ancestry. We know that Kairi had a grandmother. We don't know who her parents are, but she was her guardian while she was in Radiant Garden. I myself have also proposed the theory that Ava was the seed of light of the true dandelion that was sent into the future in one of the Arc Pods by Lushu. And her role may be that she became Kairi's grandmother. So maybe her future time point was in Radiant Garden versus Brain, whose future time point seemed to come into play in Scarlet at Kylum. If that is the case, if Ava is the same as Kairi's grandmother, then of course that would create a very strong ancestral lineage back to one of the Lost Masters. Ansem the Wise also may have important ancestry, and which maybe has a connection to Master Odin. We didn't learn too much about Master Odin in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. All we know is that he was one of the main Keyblade wielders and masters of Scarlet at Kylum. He had, those 14 students, but also we did see in the scene towards the end that he talked about evacuating other students as well. So he oversaw a lot of different students, but we don't have any backstory, any possible connections in terms of relationships, if he had kids or not. This is something that's not known right now. But it was interesting at the end of Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, during the cutscene between Xehanort and Ericus in the graveyard, that it was revealed Master Odin was thinking about retiring to like a small town somewhere after, pretty much after Ericus and Xehanort were done with their Mark of Mastery exam, and I guess is also other students as well. But this sparked an idea in my mind that, okay, if he actually did this and retired to a small town, maybe he has some connection to one of the small towns in the Kingdom Hearts worlds, be it Radiant Garden, Traverse Town, or even Twilight Town. Initially I thought Twilight Town, maybe because he ended up becoming the owner of that mansion that had so much significance to Roxas nominate in Ansem Wise's story. It was also visited in Kingdom Hearts 3 by Ansem Wise and Ansem when they were talking about Subject X. So maybe Master Odin developed roots in Twilight Town. But then I also got to thinking about kind of like the age and the timeline of what's going on, that maybe if Master Odin did have kids, possibly Ansem the Wise may be his son or grandson or something to that effect, and he went to Radiant Garden, and that's why Ansem the Wise became the leader of Radiant Garden, due to Master Odin's original presence in that small town. In any case, I think Master Odin and Ansem are very connected, and this stems through dialogue that Master Odin and also Ansem the Wise has when it comes to talking about darkness. Both seem to kind of have this obsession with trying to figure out the origin of darkness, how it's formed, where it is, and how to access it. As we've seen in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, Master Odin tasks one of his apprentices to further study and understand the darkness in order to figure out how to defeat it, while Ansem the Wise did a whole bunch of research on the darkness of the heart and what's born from it, and what's led way to these Heartless being born, these Emerald Heartless roaming around in the Kingdom Hearts world. So quite possibly Ansem the Wise was continuing on the research into the darkness that his father or grandfather had started, and that grandfather or father being Master Odin. So that's just a theory I'm proposing, that Master Odin is an ancestor of Ansem the Wise. Now, last but not least, I also kind of developed a possible connection between Demyx and the Master of Masters, again, since they have very similar antics in nature, that maybe the Master of Masters also had like a child at some point, and that could be Demyx's original form, or Demyx could be an ancestor of whoever, whatever kid the Master of Masters may have had. That's just a theory I'm throwing out there. I'm not very strong on that connection because I have other possibly stronger connections between Demyx and the Master of Masters that doesn't have to do with ancestral. Moving along into my next theory, we will discuss reborn hearts, or hearts of Kingdom Hearts characters that were given another lifetime. We do learn in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road that the old man that was the caretaker of Xehanort is also the reborn heart of the player from Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and that people with these reborn hearts can retain memories of their old lifetime, and even some people around them that have the special ability to really feel or really connect with other people can also inherit these memories, as we saw with Xehanort as he was dreaming of Ephemer and the player and Skald and all his comrades. But this debunked that original thought a lot of us had, that the player was reborn, his heart was reborn into Xehanort, but was really reborn into the old man, and Xehanort was just and Xehanort has a special ability to connect with those around him and see memories and feel their feelings. And so this is something that can be carried over, could carry over, be seen in other Kingdom Hearts characters. So going into discussing people in Sora's time that may be connected to ancient times, I'll start with Kairi, who may be the reborn heart of Ava. Again, we know that Ava was sent into the future, we just don't know at what time point, and maybe she was really sent really, really far into the future in which she was born into Kairi. And that would make that connection strong, and, kind of explain why Ava didn't show up with the rest of the Lost Masters in the Keyblade Graveyard, because of course she was sent to the future, but she's already around in the form of Kairi. Now, discussing the Master of Masters and other Lost Masters, we also have, of course, the Master of Masters himself, whose heart could have been reborn into another individual, and this individual could have been Demyx. Again, we don't know the original story or backstory of Demyx. We don't even know his real name. Obviously, it's going to be some type of form of Demyx without an X in it, but again, this could just be the name associated with the person that the Master of Masters was reborn into, kind of like how Lushu is pretty much body hopping and placing his heart in other people and having these different names throughout the Kingdom Hearts series. But here I would think that just based on personalities and antics and how they think and just how Demyx is, he would most resemble the Master of Masters, as a lot of us have thought. Now, I don't really have any strong connections between Riku and Ira, but just by default of thinking of the Lost Masters, he may be most like Ira. But then, of course, that gets confusing. So, if Ava was born into Kairi, she didn't show back because she was reborn into Kairi. But if that's the same situation with Riku, why did Ira come back? So that's kind of the conflicting thought I have there in terms of the reborn hearts. However, I have presented the theory of these extra hearts floating around as data, and maybe Riku inherited a data heart that was originally from Ira. So that's the other kind of theory that's kind of mixed in with this reborn hearts theory, in terms of if they were physically actually reborn from the person, or they were reborn from a data heart from that original person. But moving on with this theory of reborn hearts, again, maybe Ased was reborn into Terra, Envy was reborn into Aqua. Gula was reborn into Ven or Ventus. As said before, we also have Lusu, who looks exactly like Brain, but he continues on his own existence from that time point by body hopping or pretty much body snatching other individuals, in which he ends up becoming Bragi in the time of Xehanort and Ericus and Scarlet Kylum, and now he's in the form of Brig or Zigbar when he was part of Organization 13. Now moving away from the Lost Masters and moving into the Union Leaders, so the generation under, we have Brains called Ephemer and the Player. Again, we know that the player was reborn into this old man in Scarlet Kylum, and that this, his story may be further explored in the Missing Link game that's coming out. And I would assume that that main character they show with the blonde hair and the white robe is the player of that time. I'm not sure if that's the same as Sigurd, as Sigurd has a darker robe. I don't know if that's just something they kind of overlook. So I don't know if the dark robed Sigurd is the same as the white blonde haired robe guy. But if they're the same person, then yes, I would assume that that Sigurd is the player of Missing Link and is the reborn form of the player from Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. Now moving into Sora's time, because we did see that the old man did die at the beginning of Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, and so if his heart was reborn, I would say the person that I feel emulates the player the most in terms of thoughts and actions would be Ansem the Wise. And this is because there is this really big long cutscene in Kingdom Hearts Dream Distance in which Ansem's speech highly reflects the same things that the player was saying to Xehanort at Destiny Islands. And it's funny too that the cutscene itself is again at Destiny Islands, but now it's a discussion between Ansem the Wise and Riku. So that was my main thought in terms of the fate of the player now in Sora's time, and I think he's in the form of Ansem the Wise. We have Ephemer, who has ancestral lineages coming up in the Kingdom Hearts world, but I also think his heart was reborn into another individual, and I would think that individual would be Sora. They are very alike in terms of their demeanor and their determination, their drive, and of course they're two of the main Keyblade wielders of their time. Ephemer pretty much being the main Union leader, also becoming the founder of Scarlet Kylum. And then we have Sora, who is the main Keyblade wielder that we all play as. What kind of drew me to this conclusion is that interaction that Sora was having with Xehanort, because I'm remembering that Xehanort, since he was around the player, he has these memories and feelings of the player and his interaction with the other Union leaders. And at some point at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, when Sora finally defeats Xehanort, Sora was saying, giving his opinions about Destiny and if you can change fate and if you can change fate or not, or so you just let things play out, that kind of thing. But of course his response was very similar to the response or the comments that Ephemer makes when there's any discussion about Destiny or fate and what's going to happen with the world, and if light or darkness is going to prevail, or if anybody can really predict that. And so just through that conversation and Lily Xehanort saying like, oh, you remind me of an old friend, I think he was kind of speaking from the mind of the player with his connection to Ephemer, if that makes sense. Because initially when he said that, I was like, oh, maybe he's thinking of Ericus, because that's his best friend, and Ericus kind of has similar dialogue like that. But with Ericus, I think it's mainly stemming through his ancestral connection to Brain, and that kind of mentality persisted, versus when Xehanort says this to Sora, it's because Sora is probably the reborn heart of Ephemer. Now moving on to Brain, I think his heart was also reborn into someone during Sora's time as well, and I would think this person would be Luxord. Again, Luxord, we don't know his backstory, we don't know his original self or his original name. Again, like Demix, his name is going to be, any combination of the letters in his name without the X. So if Luxord is a reborn person of brain, for me that would make sense, because again, the mentality thing is pretty similar. They both like tempting fate, trying to change fate, playing games. I think that's kind of the hint that Square Enix was giving, that these two are more connected than we think, because characters are having very similar dialogues or attitude towards fate. So of course with Ericus, I would think it's stemming from his ancestral line, versus Luxord is stemming from him being reborn, being a reborn person from Brain's heart. Lastly, in this section, we have Skald, who at this point, I think pretty much most people believe that Subject X and Skald are the same person, or again, in this case, that Subject X heart was reborn from Skald when she went into the future. We don't know at what time Skald went into the future. At this point, again, with the ancestral connection, I'm assuming it's at the same time as Ephemer, because Xehanort does say when he remembers the player and his comrades that Skald looks like his mother, so I'm assuming she has to be an ancestor of Xehanort as well. However, she probably died, and when she died, her heart was reborn into this person who remembers her four friends in a key, but then she ends up in Radiant Garden for whatever reason, and now we're trying to figure out the fate of Subject X, where she was taken, presumably by Bray, because she said she was taken from her cell by a guy with an eye patch, which of course is Bray. But it seems Skald's fate would become Subject X, and that's the person she's reborn into. That now Axel and Sykes are trying to figure out her whereabouts as well. Well, Xehanort. I guess Xehanort's looking for Subject X as well, because again, Xehanort was the one that was experimenting on her. And finally, to close off this section, we have the special cases in which these two characters' hearts probably were not reborn, as they were sent to specific times in the pod. So, of course, Lorium and Arena, they were sent straight to the time of Sora and became part of the organization. So I don't think they have any people obviously in between any person that their heart could be reborn in, because they never died essentially. So they are who they are. And then we know that Sterlitzia, when she perished, she went to Quadratum, but with her, it still begs the question if her heart was reborn into another individual, and that individual is kind of carrying on in Sora's time. So that's kind of yet to be seen. Maybe that's where Ava's role is, some type of weird way. I don't know. I feel like Sterlitzia, Ava, and Kairi all kind of connected some type of way, and then maybe even to Skald and Subject X. But there is a lot of questions around Sterlitzia and her existence, and if she had someone that her heart was reborn into. Moving into the next theory, we have replaced hearts, which can also be seen in replicas. So hearts that were born from the data of another person. And these data hearts may also be used to replace the hearts of somebody else. So to kind of set up this theory, since it's again a little bit more complicated, we do know that Sora has a replica in Xion. We know that Riku has a replica in Riku Replica, obviously. And then moving into the Nobodies side, we have Sora and Ven. Since Sora and Ven were sharing a heart, they had the Nobody Roxas, and since Sora and Kairi were sharing a heart, they produced a Nobody Naminé. And so with this now, and at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, we see that Naminé, Xion, and Roxas all have bodies. They're all their individual selves now, but again, their hearts originate from their original. Either the hearts originate from Kairi, Sora, or Ventus. What's also kind of interesting about Xion, Naminé, and Roxas is that, again, their appearance is probably associated with the people that Ven's heart is connected to, and since Ven was sharing a heart with Sora, then that gave way to certain appearances of Xion and Naminé. Now we know that Naminé and Shion are supposed to look more so like Kairi, and of course Roxas looks like Ven, but for whatever reason, Shion and Naminé have different color hair than the original person. And so this made some of us think that, oh, okay, maybe Shion has this black hair because Ventus remembers Scald, and Scald had black hair. And I'm proposing now that maybe Naminé had blonde hair, maybe because of Ventus's memory of Arena. If that's not the case, maybe Naminé has blonde hair because Ava and Kairi are sharing heart, be it if they're sharing hearts or reborn hearts, or whatever their connection may be. Maybe Naminé has blonde hair because Ava has blonde hair, so maybe Naminé looks like Ava essentially. And so maybe that's the reason why. Then maybe that's the reason for the appearance of Naminé and the appearance of Shion and the appearance of Roxas. So it's kind of, a combination of the theories in terms of either reborn hearts or sharing hearts, and how people will end up, in a certain way, especially when a nobody is produced. And moving on now to the theory I presented a while ago that proposed this situation of data hearts being made from union leaders and being used to replace the hearts and people in Quadratum. Now this probably happened with brains called Ephemer and the player, as there seems to be these four main characters, being Yozora, the girl, the guy with the hat, and the guy with the glasses. Dialogue between this nameless star and Sora, and also nameless star and Riku and Kairi. When she interacts with them, we learn that her friend's heart was replaced, and his appearance is unrecognizable, and they also learn that her existence was pretty much stolen as well, and then she's kind of stuck in this in-between fate where she's not dead but she's not alive either. And so this is what I think was happening, that Skuld, whoever she was reborn into, became Subject X, and Subject X was used to replace the heart of this girl, so that would be Skuld's heart, and then while you have Ephemer's heart was used to replace Zora's, and then the players replaced the guy with the glasses, and Brain replaced the guy with the hat. And so for me, I would think it's more so the data hearts versus any reborn hearts. So I would think they have those two different existences. So you have Ephemer was reborn as Sora, but his data heart was placed into Yozora, as an example. The idea for these data hearts arose due to the ending of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, in which we have a cutscene of Ephemer and them discussing the appearance of Sterlitzia in this Daybreak Town, and how it was showing them a memory of her going off with the Master of Masters, which now is we can believe that this is the situation in terms of how Sterlitzia ended up in Quadratum. Now, but the main thing in this dialogue that stood out is that they had mentioned that, why aren't we in any of these scenes? Why aren't we appearing? And someone had said that, maybe our data hasn't been accessed yet, and that it's locked away somewhere. So, of course, if you're thinking of data hearts, if you're thinking of the replica program, if you're thinking about being locked away somewhere, you're thinking of what could possibly be in the black box. So that's, I think, what was occurring, is that this black box had a whole bunch of data hearts of, I think, the Lost Masters and the Union leaders, and this is being carried over into Quadratum to create a bigger conflict or end goal. So with that said, we can kind of transition into what's probably going to occur in Quadratum, and kind of have a better idea of what's going on with Yozora and Sora and the Master of Masters and Luxu being in Quadratum. To tie this all kind of together, now I'm kind of thinking of this connection between reborn hearts, replaced hearts, and then also replicas, and even how other characters perceive the appearance of another. The main example I'm thinking of this would be Yozora. We did learn in Kingdom Hearts 3 that when Rex and Yozora and his characters were introduced, that Rex of Taurus stories said that Yozora looked like Sora for whatever reason. But then when we see Yozora, and I'm guessing this is how Sora sees Yozora, he looks more so like maybe the Riku or Ephemer type of thing. So this is leading me to believe that there's a stronger connection between Riku, Sora, Ephemer, and Yozora. Could it be that Rex saw Yozora as Sora because Sora is a reborn heart of Ephemer? Could it be that Sora sees Yozora and he looks kind of like Riku is because he's a descendant of Ephemer? Possibly through this, this Child of Destiny line stemming from Ephemer going to Xehanort and then possibly to Riku. But we do know the appearance, whatever Yozora's appearance is, that's not what he really looks like. And I would assume probably over time, as Sora learns more about the ancient Keyblade War and Ephemer, that he'll see Yozora as Ephemer and then Yozora's actual original self, which is probably vastly different than how we're seeing him now. We also learn that the cutscene between Sora and Yozora, that Yozora said he wandered into this place and went through some trials, I guess speaking of Quadratum, and he was told to save Sora. What's interesting is that the duel kind of begins on Sora's dive into the heart stage and then, turns into the Quadratum world. But, by the end of the fight, we either see in the bad ending that Sora kind of falls into this chrysalis status or this sleep, which is not good, or we see Yozora kind of fade away. But in any case, Yozora will wake up into a daytime version of Quadratum, with his driver in the car, and they had that dialogue overlapping between Sora and Yozora saying if any of this is real or not. So you're kind of having these two different states of Quadratum that are coming into play in Yozora's dream and then in Yozora's reality. So then we're having a mess of Sora's reality, the fictional world, Yozora's reality, but then also a dream world. So there's a whole bunch of different areas kind of coming into play here. But we do know that this dreaming seems to be a very important aspect going into Kingdom Hearts 4. And it's something that we've kind of, seen before. We've seen in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, especially with Ephemer, he had this ability to kind of reach out to other people through dreams. He was able to reach out through the player and Scald in dreams in terms of warning them about coming events or influencing Scald to seek out the player and, all those kind of situations. So it would seem again that if Yozora is having these really strong dreams and he's now connecting and reaching out to Sora, that Yozora probably inherited this ability from Ephemer since he has his data heart. So I'm curious to see what other abilities Yozora has and how the relationship will play out between Yozora and Sora, and if there is this kind of dream world state of Quadratum and this real world state. And if this dream world has any connections with someone essentially dying. Is this another, we already pretty much learned that the fictional world is pretty much a heaven or a hell, whichever one you want to consider, but it's an afterlife for people in Sora's world. So it's interesting to see what direction they will go with that. But what I do believe is that Quadratum is a world that's being set up by the Master of Masters to complete his final conflict between light and darkness, in which we're seeing this goal of his is to have vessels for the darkness in order to give them form so they can be defeated and eventually become part of that bigger whole again, leading probably to the summoning of Kingdom Hearts and having this light occur, having Kingdom Hearts presence in this world. And if Kingdom Hearts presence does come into Quadratum, it'll be interesting to see if the events will unfold like the events in presumably the events in the Master of Masters' childhood, in which we learned that the people would fight over the light once Kingdom Hearts came into existence. So with this coming of darkness in Quadratum, how will these people react if Kingdom Hearts is brought forth into this world? I think that's kind of the direction that they're trying to go into with Kingdom Hearts 4 now. Now, thinking of actual Quadratum, Verum, Rex, we also have pretty much the other side, their own mission of these characters in this world. It seems to be highly influenced by another game called The World Ends With You, in which the main goal of the characters in that game was to be reborn again. So they died at some way, and they were sent to these Reaper games, in which if they went through these games that and survived these games, or did the tasks that they needed to, they would be reborn back into the real world. So I think they're kind of playing on this in Kingdom Hearts, in which now we have Verum Rex, and one of its main taglines is to reclaim your heart. And so this is what I think the original people from Quadratum, they had to reclaim their heart because it was replaced with data hearts from people in Sora's world. So I think that's the main goal or conflict that's occurring specifically with the people in Quadratum, but then the Master is just having his own plan in terms of darkness coming into this world now and possibly summoning Kingdom Hearts into it. If Quadratum is this other world for those that have perished in Sora's world, maybe this is the world in which the Master's comrades ended up, and maybe these comrades are Yozora and his other friends, as they're becoming more important characters within the story. So even though their hearts were replaced with the Union leaders, maybe the Master is using the Union leaders as a way to bring back his original comrades. And so the Masters and Yozora, the girl, the guy with the glasses and the hat, would make up 5 of the original 7. And then, of course, I've always thought that Luxor is probably original Light, and his form in Quadratum became Yozora's driver. So that's, that may be his actual original form. Like, no one really replaced his heart in this world. And then, thinking of kind of like the pattern of the 7 that they always have, it's usually like 5 guys, 2 girls. So I would think maybe even Sterlitzia was maybe original one. With her, it's a little bit more complicated since she is the sister of Marluxia. But maybe there is or maybe, there's a character that we're not introduced to yet in Quadratum that's a female that would fit this role better. Then, of course, with the complicated Demix, is he the Masters? Is he not? Is he reborn form? But if Demix really is the Master of Masters, then that would explain Luxord and Demix's significance, this whole ancient Keyblade War story. In order for the Master of Masters to bring back his comrades, I think he kind of has to reverse what happened in his childhood in terms of, Kingdom Hearts being summoned with the Keyblade, but then being scattered into 20 pieces, leading to the conflict that caused his comrades to perish. We did learn at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, and also in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, that the Master of Masters and his apprentices were strong lights that were able to become vessels for 7 of the deadliest darknesses. So with this light and darkness and balance, this would, account for the 7 of the 20 pieces needed to recomplete the Keyblade and also summon Kingdom Hearts. So now we have to find 7 other individuals that would be the opposite in terms of being strong darknesses that can be vessels for 7 strong lights and hold those in balance. And then also another 6 individuals that have very strong light that can hold the other darknesses in balance. And with these 20 individuals, again, we complete the Keyblade and Kingdom Hearts will be summoned into this world. Now, if the Master of Masters comrades fell to darkness and ended up in Quadratum, maybe that is the reason for their existence in this plot, and that these people in Quadratum are his original comrades. If these individuals come into conflict, possibly with the Master of Masters and the Lost Masters, or even like Sora and his people, or anybody with strong lights, that will, you know, complete his mission essentially of having another 7 going, you know, another 7 people harboring light and darkness in balance. So we did see at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 when Kingdom Hearts was summoned and, you know, Sora was able to seal it back. Although Kingdom Hearts disappeared, this allowed some of the Lost Masters to come back and meet Luxu in the Keyblade graveyard. Now again, this possibly occurred because Kingdom Hearts was summoned and they were kind of given their lives back. So that's what I'm thinking that the Master is just trying to do in Quadratum, is to summon Kingdom Hearts to bring his comrades back. We also have to think about the other 6 darkness. We do know that one of them ended up with Ventus, and since Ventus shared a heart with Sora, when that pure darkness was extracted from Ventus by Xehanort, it was given form as Vanitas. And so that accounts for one of the 6, but we still have the other 5. We know that 4 are still trapped in the Daybreak world in that portal vein. What we don't know is the fate of that last darkness that essentially seems to be lingering around, as we saw it appear before Master Odin when he rescued Xehanort and Ericus when they were in the Corridor of Darkness and Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. So that's the big question, is where this darkness will end up and how these other 4 darknesses will be released from their prison. So we have seen through our contact with the darkness of, having a Dark Aqua, of course, the interaction between Terra and Xehanort, or Ansem Secret of Darkness, in which we have the Dark Terra Xehanort form, and of course with Marluxia and Larxene being part of the organization, but this still isn't the true darkness that is needed to be given form. But I feel like maybe these 4 individuals will play an important role in bringing forth those 4 darknesses, or giving form to those 4 darknesses. Of course, being Terra, Aqua, Marluxia, and Larxene. Now, going back to that one darkness that seems to be lingering around, maybe it found its way into Riku, because it was seeing this darkness from Kingdom Hearts Union Cross was very connected with Luxu, but also Maleficent as well. That darkness was able to lead Data to Daybreak Town because it left with Maleficent, and then kind of stayed in Daybreak Town and communicated with Luxu, and then they fought. And I don't think, since Luxu was already harboring one of the darknesses, I don't think that darkness went to Luxu. And of course, again, we do see this darkness appear before Master Odin Kingdom Hearts Dark Road. But I think it kind of stuck, at some point is going to stick with Xehanort. And since Xehanort and Riku interacted through Ansem Secret of Darkness, we do have this darkness pretty much connected to Riku. And I always found it interesting that even though it was Riku Replica, obviously is one of the vessels of darkness for the war, but he also wears a similar outfit as Vanitas. So I think that's giving us a hint to that darkness that's still around. And I think it found its form in Riku. And of course, again, looking at Riku Replica and Vanitas looks like Sora. And of course, Riku Replica looks like Riku. And then they both have the same outfit. So I'm assuming at this point that those are 2 of the 6 darknesses that are given form. So now it's just figuring out how to give form to the last 4. But also another possibility, again, is that these 4 main people in Quadratum, being Zora and his comrades. At this point, I'm not too sure if it's going to be the girl who seems to be kind of stowed away, or maybe they may utilize Sterlitzia. But in any case, if it's Sterlitzia, the girl, that these individuals become these replicas that are able to harbor these strong darknesses because they contain the hearts of Ephemer Skull, the player, and Brain. But there's many different directions, or many different scenarios that can occur within Kingdom Hearts, especially for Kingdom Hearts 4. All we know right now is that there is an array of people that can use Keyblades at this point. Of course, the ones that were trained with the Keyblade being Terra, Aqua, and Ven. The ones that inherited the Keyblade being Riku, Sora, and Kairi, or even newly made Keyblade wielders being like Axel, possibly Saix. Of course, we have Larxene and Marluxia, who were originally from the ancient times that can wield the Keyblade, along with Sterlitzia. And last but not least, we also have Naminé, Xion, and Roxas, who are nobodies or replicas of original Keyblade wielders, and so I assume all of them will probably be able to, all of them can wield a Keyblade as well. We have, kind of comrades, people on the sidelines over here with like Zaldin, Lexius, Vexen, and Zexion, and because they're all Ansem and Wise, the princesses, and of course we know that Mickey can use a Keyblade as well. But to kind of summarize everything, it would again seem like one of the main goals of this next arc in Quadratum with Sora and his comrades and the Master of Masters and his comrades is that the Master of Masters is preparing vessels to harbor those last 6 darknesses, while also preparing vessels to harbor 7 strong lights. And once all these strong lights and darknesses are in balance with each other, you're going to have these 20 individuals that will lead to the creation of, I guess, a perfect Keyblade and the summoning of Kingdom Hearts in this fictional world. And with the summoning of Kingdom Hearts in this fictional world, will the events that happen in the Master of Masters' childhood play out the same? Or is he trying to, create a world without darkness and having this conflict finally come to an end? Is the Master of Masters trying to bring back his comrades into Sora's world, or is he trying to create a new world with his comrades within Quadratum? And if he's trying to make a new world with his comrades within Quadratum, will he have to get rid of Sora and his people from his world in Quadratum in order to accomplish this? So I think there's a lot of different conflicts that are coming up, very complicated relationships that are being developed within the Kingdom Hearts universe. But we'll see what will happen in Kingdom Hearts 4. But in the meantime, we'll wait for the release of Kingdom Hearts Missing Link to see what other questions can be answered in terms of this transition from the Age of Fairy Tales to Sora's time, and then of course onto Quadratum as well. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. I would love to hear your theories about what's going on in Kingdom Hearts, and of course any comments on my theories. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.